Hi, Lakshmi. Welcome to Forces of Fashion. So excited to be talking to you today. How are you? Where are you?
I am good. I am in Delhi, in Gurgaon, actually. It's a part of the National Capital Region, the NCR.
Yeah. Um, so thank you so much again. Obviously, our March cover star, draped in a sari, and was such a thrill to have you on the cover, and now to extend the whole concept and talk about the body. As you know, the body was a real theme grounding all the March issues globally. And just to kick off on a personal note, I remember the first time I saw you. I think I was 15 or 16. I think it was 2006. And I was completely floored because it was the first time I had seen Indian representation in fashion imagery that, wasn't Bollywood. That was this incredible editorial face. And I just wanted to start there and just talk to you about your experience when you first entered the fashion industry.
Well, I started working in fashion, well, while I was at university in India. And at that time, it was sort of, it was more like a part-time job. It was only after I graduated was when I sort of, started working in Paris. And I actually started working as a fitting model for Jean-Paul Gaultier. That was like my first big break, truth be told. And Jean-Paul Gaultier was also the kind of man, if he really liked you, and even as a fitting model, he would actually, push you for his shows as well.
Mhm.
And at the same time, he was the creative director at Hermes. And that's how I started working with him. I got cast for the Hermes jobs and eventually the campaign. So I
Yeah.
ended up shooting for that as well. So it's been a slow graph, mine. I never had any overnight success like, sort of a lot of the girls do. Mine was sort of, it was a lot of castings, a lot of rejections. It was just like, it was a very slow and steady sort of rise for me. And I think I'm actually grateful for that. It was not a crash, and you don't like go skyrocketing and then crash and burn. That didn't happen with me, I think, because of that.
You were one of the only South Asian faces essentially on the scene, particularly internationally. Growing up, I mean, did you ever imagine your place in fashion like that? How did you deal with sort of entering the fashion industry as an Indian woman, as a young Indian woman?
Well, when I started, I think Ujjwala was around during my time, or I think just before me. I think that's when she had sort of broken into the international market. And before that, I think there were a lot of girls in the 90s and the 80s, I think, especially during, with Yves Saint Laurent. There were a lot of women who were Indians at the time. And then I think there was a big lull,
Yeah.
especially I think in the mid noughts, starting there. I think for about, at least when I was there, I was probably the only one at that point.
Mm.
And there was not much representation in terms of color at that point. There were a lot of white women really in the business at that point. So it did. I mean, it was quite. How do I say? It was quite lonely, being the
Lonely.
only South Asian, because culturally you're so different, right?
Yeah.
The whole
Yeah.
thing is so different. So yeah, so there were not, I mean, but what I did was I did end up making friends with all the professionals, the hairstylists, the makeup artists, the photographers. I got to know them more, because I got to interact with these people, right? And that was for me a huge, huge learning curve.
Yeah.
So I mean, now it's so nice to see so many Indian faces out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're
I mean, that kind of brings me to there's been such a shift. Well, and there's still a long way to go, but how do you perceive the shift from when you started, and it wasn't really that long ago
It
to
wasn't.
now?
I think
You
the
know,
whole Black Lives Matter, the movement sort of shook the industry up. And I think that's when I truly started seeing a good representation of women of color.
mhm.
Before that, I think it was just tokenism, let's be honest. There were just a
Yeah.
smattering of people of color here or there. Sometimes most of the shows were just completely white, right?
Yeah.
Editorials were super white. At least now, I think, I mean, I can probably safely say that it's not a trend any longer. I think people are making an effort to, to have women of color, men of color, being represented in the business of fashion. I mean, let's not forget, I mean, South Asia is a big market. So it's
Huge.
only fair that, you have, equal representation. It has changed a lot, and I'm really happy for it. And I think it's about time.
I mean, do you feel a level of responsibility or a bit like a flag bearer in a way for South Asian representation within the fashion industry? Do you feel that weight on your shoulders in a way?
I don't really think of myself as a flag bearer. I think there have been many before me who have, opened the doors to, modeling actually. If I am a flag bearer, I mean, at least for this particular, the last 10 years, right? If you want to call it that, it's nice. I mean, it's a nice feeling. I don't think it's a heavy burden on my shoulder. It's nice that I've been able to open doors for other people. That's
Yeah.
that's the whole point of, I think, my responsibility also in whatever, I mean, whether it was fashion or anything else that I was doing. I mean, the important thing is that you open doors to others to be able to experience something like this.
And I guess, leading on from that, I mean, there's certainly, as we touched upon, there's so many incredible South Asian faces now, gracing the runways and in campaigns. And, we just saw Avanti, have an amazing season, and you got your Ashleys and whatnot. Do you have any advice for them? Or maybe advice to a younger version of yourself sort of entering the industry?
I think
Anything that
Well, I think the only advice that I would have for them is, I think, spend less time on social media and spend more time educating yourself. Because I think the great thing about fashion, at least for me, I mean, travel was a huge education. I did a lot of things outside of fashion, going to galleries, museums, catching theater, shows, all of that for me. I mean, that was a parallel thing that I always made sure that, I did other things outside of fashion as well. Because when you truly look at fashion, fashion is influenced by so many things, right? It's not just purely fashion.
Yeah.
So it's important to educate yourself. And I think, and keep yourself interested and be curious about things. And the last few times that I did shows, I mean, I just see everybody on their phones, right? They're all just scrolling. It's their thumbs you see moving. And I don't think they're even registering anything. You become so fatigued by so much of content on that little device, right? So you're accumulating anything, you're just looking, and you're not seeing anything. And if you just shut that phone down and have a conversation with whoever is doing your hair or makeup, or whoever you're working with, whoever's sitting next to you, it's you're opening yourself to a whole new world, a different experience. And I think that's what is really critical in your growth as a human being, and as a professional.
Yeah. And I guess it comes back to, I guess what we're discussing is being in your body and being present in the moment, right? That's kind of, I mean, in terms of, just coming back to the idea of the body, and obviously with the March cover shoot, it was you, and, our protagonist was also the Sari. Can you talk a bit about your relationship with Indian wear and how you perceive the body in an Indian context? I know we touched upon that.
For me, I think it's a beautiful, it's a wonderful, it's just literally a strip of cloth, right? That's really what it means in Sanskrit. And it gives the wearer complete autonomy as to how you want to wear it, what you want to reveal, do not want to reveal, or not reveal anything at all. And that's the beauty of it. So you become your own, in a way, your own draper designer, right? If I want to sort of show off my shoulder, may keep it like an off shoulder thing, I can do that. If I want to cover it entirely, or, wear it as a scarf around my neck and, take it all around, I can do that. That's truly what it is. It's how you sort of inhabit the sari.
Yeah. I mean, it's so modern and utilitarian and ancient. It's incredible.
So when you see women in, in the vernacular towns and places, where the way they wear it, and you can truly see how functional that garment is.
Yeah.
It's it's an absolutely functional piece. It's beautiful, and it's, it's the weave, it tells you a story about a place, a culture. It's fantastic. And I
And
think
so I thought it was so interesting, like when we, when you sort of were wearing the sari in the cover shoot, we got rid of the blouse and the petticoat and everything, and it was just really about wrapping the body and encasing the body.
it's actually not worn with a blouse. The blouse came
Mm,
much later in the Victorian era, and especially, during when we were colonized by the British. This was really in the, I think it would have been in the early 19th century, I think, when they started wearing the blouse and the petticoat. And this was actually the women of Calcutta, after
mm,
seeing the British women, wearing petticoats under their skirts. And it was actually a fashion thing. It just like became like a staple afterwards. If you go into the tribal areas, even now, women just wear they wear the pallu actually to cover their breasts. They don't wear a blouse. And
no,
if you see the working women, the fisher women, the women who work in the fields, they don't wear a petticoat because it restricts their movement.
yeah,
The
it's
sari
different.
actually gives you great room to actually, if you want to compete as an Olympic athlete, if you wore a sari and if you knew how to wear it, you could actually do it. You know what I
Totally.
mean?
No, it's amazing. I'm interested to know as well, because, I guess at that time, there is a very sort of typical representation or idealization of what is beautiful, I think, within Indian popular culture. How your beauty and what you represent is something that maybe is a little bit outside of what that typical sort of, Bollywood-esque representation looks like. How were you received in India sort of after you started modeling on the international circuit, and vice versa? How have you found the reception to what you represent in India? Has it been different to what it was internationally?
It has been, but it never translated to any work, truth be told. I've not
Okay.
done any, I've done a lot of editorials in India. I've done a lot of shoots for Vogue, their covers, and other magazines, but nothing that actually translated into commercial work, if you want to put it that way. The commercial work is pretty much reserved for the Bollywood elite, actually, if you want to, that's how it's just been, because they have a massive draw. India is
Yeah.
obsessed with Bollywood, cricket, and religion, right? These are the three things that make this country really like. But I think it's changing. I think now with, of course, with social media and with the amount of information that kids have now, the Gen Zs, the millennials, I feel they've opened, it's sort of opened their idea of beauty. It's not as singular as it used to be. It's not just Bollywood. They're seeing other things as well. So I think that's changing, and it's
Yeah.
important that in India as well. I mean, Bollywood can't be the only thing that's that makes India, right? There's so much more, and I think that's what needs to be explored, really.
When you started modeling, and I guess your journey through having a child then to now, what has been the relationship you have with your body? How has it changed from when you started to where you are
When I
now?
started, I was 20, and now I'm 41. It's a massive difference.
It's quite a journey.
Every decade it's different, right? When you're in your teens, you're in your puberty, you see your body changing, right? It's you're growing breasts, and you see your hips forming. And then your 20s, it's like you're the epitome of youth at that point, right? And then in the 30s, you're kind of like looking, it's a nice place to be. And in 40s is an entirely different decade. But it's great. I mean, because you're in my headspace is so much better, right? At this point,
Yeah.
I feel so much more self-assured. I don't really other people's opinion of me really doesn't really bother me. I know who I am, what I'm about. So, it's a whole different way of inhabiting your body as well. After having a baby, things change. It's just the
Yeah.
way it is. So many things. You lose your hair. It's not as good as it used to be. It's not as full as it was. You end up with, I had a postpartum thyroiditis. Things, hormonal changes. Your breasts change. You're nursing your baby. Your hips change. Everything just changes. But I think as long as you embrace it,
Yeah.
and take it as, this is just part of life and you're comfortable with it, I think it's fine. That's all you need to do. And I don't think we should just, again, I think this being obsessed with the idea of youth, I think, and, being terrorized by the idea of youth, I think that's what we need to sort of, stay away from. Because I think every age is beautiful as long as you embrace it in that way. And I think, and I find that the women who have truly embraced that are the ones who truly look beautiful at any given stage in their life, at whatever age. It's the ones who fight it and are terrorized by the idea of aging, and it shows.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you embrace it? Like, has it just been a natural evolution?
It's just
Becoming a mother?
absolutely natural evolution of becoming a mother, getting gray hairs now. And, I'm just like, what, this is it. This is what it is. I don't have to fight it. There's no point fighting the grayness, but I just, that's hard work. And what, no matter what, ultimately we all go through the process of aging in different ways, right? And that's all there is to it. And I think if you just embrace that and you're comfortable with it and you get on with your life, I think it's fine. It's not gonna hurt you.
Do you do anything like in terms of a wellness regime, or are there ways that you look after your body?
I do. I work out. I do yoga pretty much every day. I wake up at 5 in the morning. I do yoga for an hour and I meditate for 45 minutes. I think those are like critical tools to get on with your life. And I do Pilates and I play sports. I love to swim. I play squash. I've always played a sport in my life. I mean, all my years since child. So, I've always enjoyed that. And I think those things, and I enjoy it. You know what I mean? So, playing a sport, playing with a friend, playing with a marker, it just brings me great joy.
Yeah, you gotta enjoy
you
these
are able to find joy and, in whatever it is that you're doing, I think you just remain youthful, and that just shows.
It's about a spirit. It's not
nurturing that spirit. It's about nurturing that soul inside of you. And the minute that happens, I think you just remain youthful. It just shows in your eyes. It just shows in your face, in your smile. I think that's really the winning, I think that really is the trick.
And I mean, being a mother now with a daughter, and we touched a bit on social media, and just thinking about what are the things that you really want to instill in her about her body and her relationship with her body, and just understanding what's amazing about it, and how to also maybe be shielded from societal pressures. That must be something that weighs heavily on your mind.
It does. And I think especially with social media and with this whole body dysmorphia, and I think, this heavily photoshopped images, I think that does play, it does play very seriously on young children, I think. I try to keep it real. That's all I can do, Megha. That's the only thing I can do for my daughter, is just to keep it real and just tell her what it is, what it's like to be a woman, when you go, when you reach the stage of, puberty, pre-puberty, puberty, and then, the way your body changes. I can only just keep my line of communication open with her at all times. And not judge her for her thoughts or what she's thinking, and just to sort of guide her in just keep guiding her. That's all I can do. I can't do anything else beyond that. She's going to ultimately make the choices herself. I can't make the choices for her.
Yeah.
As long as I'm able to guide her and just, nurture and nourish her spirit, and, have body positivity in the sense that it doesn't matter what size you are, right? It's got nothing to do with anything. And, you don't have to be a size 0 or anything, any of those, ridiculous standards of beauty that, that used to sort of, that was quite sort of strong in the early 2000s. And while I was also working, I think now there's a lot of body positivity, and it's nice to see, different shapes and sizes on the runway. I think it's important. I think there should be more of those, though.
Yeah,
As a
I
model,
agree.
when you think about it, you're literally the 2% of that population, which is, ridiculously thin, remarkably tall. The rest of the world is not. So for the rest of the 98% of the population to subscribe to that idea of beauty, I mean, that's horrible.
Yeah, yeah.
But on the other
It's
hand, if you have a fair representation of color, skin color, body types, heights or whatever it is, and I think it should be that way.
Do you feel like you're a better model now than you maybe were then?
Absolutely. I think as you get older, there's so much more that you can give. There's so much more that you've experienced in your life. There's so much depth and perspective that you gain, right? And that only comes with age, I think. It's just about the time that you spend on this planet. That's what makes it. And it truly does. I mean, I feel like I'm definitely a better model now than what I was 20 years ago. My whole interaction with the way I work and what it's about, it's entirely different from when I first started.
And I mean, isn't that an amazing thing to just know and see, and for people to understand that, there are no age limits, there are no sort of restrictions on.
And I think the age limits and all of that, those are very sexist. It's actually very sexist thoughts, actually, that a woman is past her due date or whatever, after she turns 40 or 35 or 30. I mean, when I tell people that, yeah, I'm a fashion model, they're like, what? And and I've been doing it for 20 years. They're like, what age did you start? I said, I was 21 and I'm now 41. They're like, you still model at 41? I'm like, why not?
Of course. Of course. Show them the March cover. This is how I like at 41. One other point that I'd love to discuss with you before we sort of wrap up is representation in India specifically, because I find that quite fascinating just in terms of, pop culture there, and just, the way women are fetishized in terms of, either being a vamp or chaste, or, these very sort of prescribed roles. I'm interested to understand how you view it, how far there is to go, and what you want to see more of within.
What it was, I would imagine in the 90s, when I was a teenager, to how this whole thing is, I mean, how women are perceived now, there's a huge difference. And I think the younger generation, they definitely don't have this thing about the vamp or the chaste woman. I think that is changing definitely, and I think it's also now changing in terms of in the films. I think Bollywood films as well. I think that is also changing. That whole, it's not as it used to be in, I think, the films of the 80s and the 90s were all about that. The heroine was always chaste, and the vamp was the one who would drink and smoke and have premarital sex, right?
Shocking.
It's shocking, but that's changing. And I think with a lot of the OTT content, I think that's definitely changed that perception of people. I mean, of people. And I think now, I don't think it's so much, at least in the urban areas. I don't know. I think the rural area still needs a lot of catching up. It's still heavily patriarchal. Life is still very tough for women there. In the rural areas in India, there's a lot of misogyny. There's a lot of violence against women. It's happening on the ground here, but I think it is slowly changing. There are a lot of groups that are actually educating men. I think this is Village. I was reading somewhere. I don't know if it was Rajasthan or Punjab, where they're educating men to how to be with women, how to be feminists, and this is in a village, and it's apparently been a very successful program.
Yeah, and as as a mother, as a model, but also as a creative, and just as an industry as a whole within India and beyond, what do you think? What is the responsibility that you think we all have as collectively as a fashion industry to try and push healthier images of body diversity and whatnot forward within India?
And I think everybody needs to be a feminist, truly. I think that really would be a game changer. I think we need to raise our boys as feminists and our girls as feminists. And when I say feminist, it's not a bad word. It's just about being able to respect another human being. And Megha, we're all human beings by the end of the day. Okay, our gender is, is what sort of, separates us or whatever biologically. But
Mm.
at the end of the day, we're people, we feel pain, we feel love, we feel the same, the emotions are the same that bind us.
As you sort of, being in your, your early 40s, so to, just to call it out again, is there anything that you're particularly excited about coming up, or just, being at the stage in your life, and maybe, being at the stage of your life in your body as you are?
I'm just enjoying the moment. I just live in the present now. I don't think so too much about the future. It's, I enjoy my time with my child and, just watching her grow up and just being present in my body and in my mind. And, that's what is important. And I think that yoga and meditation and, doing the little sports that I play, I mean, these things just kind of help me stay present, actually.
Stay grounded. We'll have to have a hit of squash one day
We
when I
will
get there.
when you want.
Well, thank you so much, Lakshmi. I can't thank you enough for all your insights, and it's been wonderful talking to you about the body and beyond. And, I'm just waiting with bated breath to see you grace another major international campaign or another runway.
Fingers
Yes,
crossed next
absolutely.
season,
You're,
hopefully.
you're an icon. Can't thank you enough. And thank you for being our March cover star.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.